During this one final video, what I want to do is I want to talk about something that I kind of skipped from the beginning, and I did that on purpose, and there's actually a really good reason why I did that. I want to talk about the render manager. If we go over here to render, you'll see something called the render manager. Let's go ahead and open that up. And you can see it's this window, this PPG sort of window, that has a ton of different options. And if you were exploring here on your own, you probably found this by now. If you haven't, well, you found out about it now. And what it has is a ton of different options that looks pretty overwhelming for a beginner, and even for somebody who's coming over from older versions of XSI like XSI 5 or 4.2. You'll come in here, see this new render manager, which is a new feature of XSI 6, and you'll probably be overwhelmed by this and just look at it and just go, oh my goodness, what is this? Look at all these different, what does all this stuff do? So many different options, so little time to decipher it all. Well, that's kind of why I left this toward the end of the tutorial. The reason is that for beginners, I didn't want to just open this up from the first video, this massive, crazy looking window with all these options, and simply say, okay, this is what this does, and blah blah blah, and just go through all these things one by one, because I would be talking for a good hour or something. There's just so many options, and by the end, or within the first 5 minutes, you'd probably turn this video off, or you'd probably doze off, or go to sleep, or who knows what you'd be doing. So that's why I left this for the last video, because after you've been working for a good amount of time with Mental Ray and with rendering and XSI the way that we have been throughout this tutorial. I mean, we went through global illumination, we talked about area lights, final gather, caustics, a whole bunch of neat things in Mental Ray. By now you've probably seen this window a few times. You probably understand, for example, what the renderer options are over here. You probably are more familiar with these output settings and things over here than you would have been right at the beginning of the tutorial, when you would have never seen this before, or where it would have been so new to you that you wouldn't have retained all that knowledge and information if I would have tried to force that down your throat at first. So I left this for last. So let's go ahead and look at what exactly this is. Now, a lot of people, a lot of XSI artists have told me that they don't like this render manager. They actually hate it. Well, the truth is that they hate it is because they don't understand it, and it makes no sense. I gotta tell you, when I first started using it myself, I wasn't too happy with it, and I was kind of confused by it because I was used to doing a workflow from earlier versions of XSI. Once I got into it, though, I totally understood it. It made total sense once I wrapped my mind around it, and I realized, wow, this is actually a great feature that should have been in XSI a long time ago. It's a perfect common sense feature, like all the different features in XSI, and it makes perfect sense to have it. So let me go ahead and show you what this render manager does and why it's so important to use and what's so good about it. Okay. So we got all these different menu tabs over here to open up a ton of different little tabs and different options. Well, we know that so far. So what we don't know is, if we go over here to render, let's tear this menu off. We have 3 different options for rendering. We have scene options, pass options, and renderer options. What I'm going to do is open up each one of these one by one and pin them down so they don't go anywhere. I'll open up the pass options and pin that down. Now open up the renderer options, which you can see right here. And I'll close that menu, I don't need it anymore, and I'll pin that down. So essentially what I have is these 3 menus with a lot of different options and items over here that can be pretty daunting at first and kind of confusing, actually very confusing for someone new to XSI, or new to rendering for that matter. Alright, so we see we've got all these different menu options. Over here we have our pass options, over here we have our scene options, and over here we have our renderer options, which in this case the current renderer is Mental Ray, so we're going to get Mental Ray renderer options. And we have all these different menus. All these different menus and things, all these 3 different PPGs and all the options inside of these PPGs control different aspects of rendering within XSI. So all of these different options will affect your rendering, your final rendered image, in one form or another. Okay? Now, if you think about it, it would be pretty annoying that every time you want to access these menu items, you would have to go to that little menu that we went to over here on the left in the toolbar and open up these different options like the scene options, the renderer options, the pass options, all individually by themselves, and have to come in here and adjust all these different options. Because we could end up accidentally losing these menus if we didn't pin them down. We might actually close this menu and then adjust some things over here and then realize, oh, you know what? I need to open up that menu up again. Well, then you got to go over here to renderer. You got to go, and that was our pass options. So I have to open up my pass options again, pin it down, and adjust it in. As you can see, it's pretty boring just listening to me talk about that workflow, let alone actually doing the workflow yourself when working on your projects. So you can see that would be a pretty dumb way of working, pretty inefficient and slow, right? Well, that's where the render manager kicks in and solves that whole problem altogether. Okay, so how does it solve that problem? Well, here's my render manager, and it's got a ton of different options. What the render manager essentially comes down to, it's a one-stop shop for all your rendering needs. Okay? What you can do is access all the different things that were in all three of those menus inside of this one nice clean menu called the render manager. And the render manager is a separate tool add-on, so it doesn't work like these PPGs that you have to pin down. You don't have to pin down the render manager. The only way it'll close is if you manually go ahead and close it yourself. And you could collapse it like every other menu by double clicking on the name bar up here where it says render manager to get it out of the way and save yourself some real estate space here on your interface. Okay, so let's see how this works. Here it says default pass options under the first tab that says output. So when you click on the output tab, it opens up the pass options. Well, here's the pass options over here on the left. Let me go ahead and put this right next to it so you can see a side-by-side comparison. Essentially what this is the same exact menu. We're looking at the same menu twice. What do I mean by that? Well, let me go ahead and show you. If I go down here to frame range and I adjust the frame range in my render manager scene options over here in the pass options, I'll see that the pass options get updated. Why is that? That's because both of these menus are the same, so when you update one, the other one gets updated too. So if I check this on, it gets checked on in both menus. If I check it off, it gets checked off in both menus. And it doesn't matter from which menu you go ahead and check that on or off, both are going to update. So if I do it from this menu over here on the left, the one on the right updates. And if I do it from the one on the right, the render manager, the one on the left updates. So there really is no master because they're the same exact menu. These are not two different menus. They're essentially the same menu. We're just looking at it twice. It's kind of like a mirror. So why would you want to go ahead and open up these individual menus when you can just have them open for you automatically here in the render manager, and you don't have to worry about pinning down the PPG, losing the PPG. You don't have to be working with three different PPGs all side by side next to each other, taking up all your room here in XSI. That is going to hurt your workflow and your speed. So as you can see, we can go ahead and change options here from one menu to the other, and they update. Those options update and propagate to all the different menu options. So this is a great way, the render manager is a great way of accessing all three of these menus from one main master menu known as the render manager. Okay, so all these different options that are over here are the same options that are over here, as you can see. So let's close this PPG. Here's the scene render options. Okay, so what are the scene render options? Well, if we go to the globals tab over here in the render manager, you'll see this tab called scene. Those are your scene render options. I mean, if you look at it carefully, you'll notice I'm not making this up. You can see that it's the same options. If I switch to hardware renderer here, it switches to hardware renderer here. If I go over here and change the frame start and end, it changes over here in the render manager as well. So you can see that I have control over this from either menu. So the point is, why go ahead and open up these individual PPGs from here, from going here to scene options, pass options, and renderer options, when I can just open up the render manager in one shot and have access to all these things at one time. It just makes it easier and faster for you to work. And anything that you can do to save time and to increase the efficiency of your workflow is an added plus. That's definitely something that you want to go ahead and use. So over here we have renderer options, and if we look at our renderer over here, our Mentor renderer options that we had opened up from over here, the render options here. Okay, we can see these are the exact same options. So as I make a change here, you can see the change in this PPG. If I make a change in the PPG, you'll see the change update over here in the render manager. So you can see how this can save you a lot of time instead of opening those individual PPGs. And then we also have a few things here in the render manager that we don't have access to in these little PPGs, so that's another plus for the render manager. If we go over here to the summary tab, we can see a summary, and we can group the summary by pass or by type, and we can quickly see a summary that tells us what our different options are without having to go into these different menu items. So it takes options from the different menu items, like over here in the pass options, the render options, the scene options, and it puts them together in this quick text format summary over here. So it's going to tell you that the default pass output is set to 2048 by 1494. It's going to tell you that your aliasing right now for your default pass is set to -1 and 0. Motion blur is turned off. You're going to be rendering from frames 1 to 100. Here's the name of the actual image. Is going to be default pass render.1.pic. It also tells you where the location is where these rendered images are going to be shot out to, which in this case is the render pictures folder of the project directory that we're working with. It tells you the directory or the address of that location on your hard drive, on your computer, and so on and so forth. So this can be pretty useful, looking at the summary, to quickly skim through here and see exactly what's going to be rendered how and where. Then you have this globals over here, which opens up the scene render options, which we already saw. It opens up a mental ray render options and a hardware render options. And what this is, it's a master render option over here. So we can tell mental ray to render out with certain options, and every time we go over here to the render options and we're using mental ray, those are the options that are going to be used or start off with in our scene. And then we have scene preferences here, which you can change, and the changes you make here in these rendering preferences are going to stick forever. So in other words, when I open new scenes with XSI, if I come in here tomorrow, turn on my workstation, jump into XSI, whatever settings that I put in here and these preferences are going to be remembered every time I open up XSI. So it's a pretty neat feature. So I can come in here and tell XSI, well, every time I open up XSI, I want my output for my images to always be EXR, or I want them to always be Targas or TIFFs or JPEGs or whatever it is that I want. So that can be a pretty useful thing right here with the preferences. So you don't have to be changing common options every time you open up XSI. You have them set up as preferences for you, so when XSI opens up, bam, you're already ready to go. So you have a bunch of different options here. If we make any changes, we can go ahead and hit refresh to refresh the render manager, and then it'll show you any changes that you have. We can also choose what current pass we want. So if right now we have a default pass, which is of course the default pass XSI creates by default when you open up a new scene. We can also go down here to edit, go to new pass, and we can create a new shadow pass, an ambient pass, diffuse pass, global illumination pass. We can even create empty passes that we can go ahead and customize and change, and a PPG will open up, and we can change the pass name to say my pass. Close that PPG, and here in the list you won't see my pass available. That's because we have to refresh this. Once we refresh it, you'll see now we have two passes, the default pass and my pass. And my pass can use its own options and settings over here. And then if you switch over to default pass, it can have its own settings over here. Or you can have them both use the same exact settings. So this can become very useful. You can see the render manager is the control hub for all your rendering needs and options. So then you can finally tell it to render the current pass, and it'll render out frames 1 to 100 onto your hard drive, so you can render out your animations or whatnot. You can also render just selected passes. You can render all the different passes. So if you have 2, 3, 4, 10 passes, you can hit the all button, and every single pass is going to be rendered out one after the other. You can also display the passes by order of creation. You can also display them by alphabetical order, which is, in this case, is going to remain the same because D comes before M. And etc, etc. You have so much control over your different passes. You can come over here to your output settings click on it to select it, hit edit, and then from here you can change the name of the image that's going to be rendered out to your hard drive. You can also change the format over here, so if I want to switch from .pic to JPEG or bitmap or whatever I want, I can go ahead and do that. So there's a ton of different things that I can do here with this render manager to control rendering. So in a nutshell, that's pretty much how the render manager works and basically what its purpose is in the rendering workflow. So hopefully that opened your mind up to it. I suggest you keep working with rendering. After you view this tutorial, work on your own. Try to mimic the results that you saw in the video, and you can also open up the source scenes that come with this tutorial so you're not left in the dark, so to speak. You can open up those source scenes. They'll always be have the word finished at the end of their name, so you know that those are the finished scenes. They have the render settings all activated and switched on and everything, so you can go ahead and just hit render and see the nice results and basically dissect the scenes and see how exactly it is that I went ahead and did it, so you can learn how to do it yourself. So that covers the render manager and how it works, also what its uses are, and to learn how to use that render manager and master it so that you can go ahead and master rendering in XSI with Mental Ray.